On today's Tech Help for Churches, podcast equipment in the stages of production. Hi everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Tech Help for Churches. My name is Paul Allen Clifford, and I'd love for you to join the conversation. So if you have any questions, comments, or what have you, head on over to trinitydigitalmedia.com/contact. And there you can find all my contact information, like my email address, which is paul@trinitydigitalmedia.com. Kind of intuitively. I did that on purpose. You can find my Twitter handle, which you might know since I wrote the book on Twitter for churches. I'm pretty active over there, so that's Paul Allen Cliff, PaulAlanClif. Or if you're more of a phone person, 1-877-POD-ECHO, 1-877-763-3246, and you can get in touch with me there. Also, if you're watching this show either on my website or on YouTube, just put a comment below. I'll try and remember to remind you to do that later. Also, if I don't remember later, I'm looking for iTunes reviews. So I'm looking for a good, honest review. One sentence, two sentences. Don't feel like you have to write War and Peace. And just to make it easy, I have gone ahead and made some short links for you. So head over to trinitydigitalmedia.com/iTunes reviews. And that's all one word, by the way. And that will give you all the links that you need to write some reviews, and I would really appreciate those. So let's get started. First off, talking about podcast gear. So what I'm doing, if you already have a copy of my book, you can just go through it with me. I have just decided to go through these chapters in the order that I wrote them, and I'm just tackling a couple of chapters a week just as topics for us to talk about, because I thought I spent a lot of time thinking about how I would help churches learn to podcast. So since this is Tech Help for Churches, I thought I would go through that. So let's first talk about equipment. Now you might be thinking that it would take a lot of money to get going on podcasting, but really it doesn't. But then again, it depends on what you're planning on doing. If you're doing a show like mine, which is just a single person video, that's much easier than doing your entire church service with different cameras and such. If you're trying to do just audio, that's also very easy. In fact, it's much easier than doing video. But I thought I'd go through some of the different pieces of equipment that you need. First off, you need some software. Let's start with audio, just because it's easier, and video includes all the audio stuff, so that makes it easy. So most podcasters tend to use one of two programs, either Audacity, which is a free open source audio editing software, or GarageBand, which is free on the Mac, unless you have an older Mac, but recently they've started giving that away. So GarageBand it works perfectly fine for this, unless you're trying to do the enhanced podcast format, which we'll talk about on a future show. But in general, that's really all you need. You need to be able to do audio transitions, etc. Now, what I'm doing is I'm doing this live. So if you're watching this at 11:07 a.m. on Monday, not September yet, Monday, June 9th, 2014, you're watching me do this live. And I'm using different software. I'm not actually going to be doing much editing at all on this, hopefully. I'll just be trimming out the beginning and the end to make a cohesive whole. So that's if you're going to do it live to tape. is what I call it, or live to hard drive, then you would need something totally different. But most people are going to start by recording the main chunks and then putting in intro music and an outro and maybe a voiceover, just pretty simple stuff. So GarageBand or Audacity are great tools for this. If you're a PC person, there are tons of choices on the PC. SoundForge, is that what it's called? Anyway, Sony makes something, Adobe makes something, Adobe Audition. Those are good choices. They're more expensive, but there are also plenty of free choices, including Audacity, which, as I say, a lot of podcasters use. I'm not going to talk about computer hardware because I think any modern piece of hardware can handle audio or video editing. And by modern, I mean made in 2010 or later. So it's 2014. If you can't get a 2010 computer, you should be able to pick one up pretty cheap, used on eBay or even Amazon. So I think that's really all that you need. Headphones. Ideally, I'm not using headphones right now, and sometimes that comes back to bite me because the software that I use has a little bit of a delay, and it's so annoying that I can't actually talk. But ideally, you would use what are called circumaural headphones. Those are the ones that fit around your ears, as opposed to ones that go in your ears. Those are intraaural, or ones that go on top of your ears, supraaural. The bare minimum entry-level ones that I'd recommend are the Sony MDR-V 150s. I've used those for years, and while they might not be perfect, for $20 they're better than the ones that they threw in with your Android phone. So it's I think it's worth that modest investment to get decent headphones. Do avoid noise canceling headphones though, because they're actually adding something to the sound so that it cancels out outside noise. So I don't want you to get those. Microphones, you want a good microphone, not something you pick up at Radio Shack. Sorry, Radio Shack. I did used to work for you, so I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. Probably bare minimum is what I'm using here. This is a Behringer XM8500. Let me make sure I'm not forgetting. Yes, XM8500, which is a kind of look-alike of the Shure SM58. Chances are at your church you have some Shure SM58s, and if you do, those are fine. And by fine, I mean great. They're about $100. If you catch them on sale, they're about $100. If you catch them not on sale, about $120. But those are great microphones that you could beat with a hammer and they would still work. And I say that because I think I've seen them beat with a hammer. There are some effects that you could use. For example, when you're speaking naturally, sometimes you're very quiet and sometimes you're very loud. In headphones or recorded media, that gets really annoying. So we use what's called a compressor. And what a compressor does is it compresses the distance from the loudest sound to the quietest sound. So basically it raises the quiet sounds and lowers the loud sounds so that they're in the same range. So that's what a compressor is. Often they'll also include a limiter, which will prevent you from peaking the microphone, prevent you from recording so loud that instead of the waveform being circular on the top, it's clipped and it sounds kind of gross. So a limiter will do that. Another thing that you might consider is a gate. Now, none of these are absolutely required. What's required is a microphone and a way to record it. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. But another thing you might consider getting is a gate. Now what a gate does is you set a certain threshold, and if something is quieter than that threshold, like the fan noise of your computer, for example, which if I'm quiet you can probably hear mine. Hear that? Yeah, that's the fan noise. I really need to get a gate, which would, whenever I'm not talking, because I'm talking at a much louder volume, and it can say, oh, loud, turn up, soft, turn down. And it's got adjustments for how quickly it starts and how quickly it stops, and how loud and how quiet that is, so that it can really make it seem very quiet. But if you overdo it, it can sound like nothing, person talking with loud sound in the background, nothing, person talking with loud sound in the background, and can be very annoying. A few years ago there was a cell phone company that's one of the things they did, is they had a gate on their cell phones, and it was really annoying. Every time someone would pause, it would go completely dead. Like you think, oh, they just dropped the call. No, they were just being quiet. So you can overdo that. Audio mixers, if you just have a single mic and you're editing in post, you probably don't need a mixer. I actually have an old Tascam M35 that I saved out of a dumpster several years ago, and you hear my elbow bumped one of the sliders there, and there was just a little echo. But really, you probably don't need it unless you've got multiple people or a Skype call or something like that, which is why I have it, in case I do those kinds of things. Additionally, while you can record into your computer, every podcaster that records into his or her computer has a story about getting a podcast done and having to re-record it because the computer gacked up somehow. So it's worth having a portable recorder. Now, not just the cheapies that you get at Walmart or the office supply store. I'm talking about a decent portable recorder. So Zoom, Tascam, and there's another whose name is escaping me. Anyway, those are all good brands for these things. Now you're going to need a way to get the audio into your computer if you do choose to record onto the computer. Most computers have an audio line in. Sometimes, with the way computer power supplies work, you'll get a buzz. If that's the case, you might consider one of these. This is a Griffin iMic, which is a USB device that generally eliminates that. Or if you were using that on your computer for something else, or let's say for some reason it broke, this is like a $20, $30 item that can fix that problem. So let's say that you want to go to video. Now remember, putting a video on YouTube is not a podcast. YouTube is a great streaming web video service, but it's not a podcast service. You need a different host, but we'll talk about that more. Let's start with cameras. Probably one of the best cameras you can get nowadays would be a DSLR. This is my Canon T3i. If you're watching the video, you can take a look at it. This is the kit lens, which is more than adequate for what most of you would be doing. But the downside of DSLRs is, unless you get the right one, you can have a problem with, first, the mic preamps are horrible. Once you turn them up to an adequate level, you get so you have to boost the sound before it gets into the DSLR. Problem number one. Problem number 2, short recording time. Not all DSLRs have this problem. So the Canon 70D, the 70D, which if you go to bit.ly/70 spelled out D, that'll take you to an affiliate link where you can just take a look at the 70D. That's about $1,000, but it's a great DSLR and it doesn't have that limitation, unlike my T3i, the T2i, the T4i, the T5i, the 7D, the 60D, and etc. So do look at that. A lot of the Panasonic mirrorless cameras don't have that problem, so just consider it. I will say that if you're just doing a show like this, I'm actually using a Logitech webcam, which is a 1080p webcam, and that's giving me great results. I've actually got some additional software on the back end that allows me to control it a little bit better than you normally can. So I can set it and then lock it in, as opposed to let it make decisions on what is in focus and what is out of focus, etc. If you have multiple cameras, you will need a video switcher. Now that could be software, it could be a TriCaster, it could be the Blackmagic ATEM TV production studio. Any of those are possible choices, but you would need a switcher unless you record each of them separately, edit them together in post, and that's going to take a lot more time. But it takes a lot more skill to do it live, so you've got to balance this out. Camera support, you need a tripod. You just do. Trust me on this, but you don't need a cheap tripod unless you're using a webcam like I am. I'm using a webcam with like a 8-inch tall tripod on my desk in front of me. I don't have it on my monitor because that would be too high, because I'm trying to keep my monitors at eye level. So clipped on the monitor would be above eye level looking down on me, which is not what I'm looking for. So you do need a tripod. If you're moving the camera at all, you need a good tripod. A good tripod will not be one that you pick up at Sears for $20. It will be one that you get at a camera store, probably made by Bogan Manfrotto, at least $100. I've used tripod or pedestal systems that cost multiple tens of thousands of dollars, and there's a reason they do. Professionals are not stupid. They use the best equipment they can afford because it just makes it easier to do good work. So if you're going to be panning and tilting live on your camera, then absolutely buy a good tripod. Don't expect a cheap one to work. Lighting. Now you can use the sun, although it's a little unpredictable because there's weather and stuff, depending on where you live. But that doesn't have to be an excuse. One of the video podcasts I used to listen or watch was shot outside in Canada year-round, except when the host went to Florida during the winter on occasion for maybe a week or two. But the lighting was great. Inside, you really need 3-point lighting. Now, if you're doing stage lighting, if you're doing this for your church, it's going to require a lot more lights. If all you have is overhead lights, well, let me try and simulate what would happen. I can't really do it. I'd need a light. But you can get like a raccoon eye effect because your forehead ridge that your eyebrows sit on, that shades your eyes, which is normally good when you have the sun. But when it shades your eyes, a video camera can't tell as much difference between dark and light, and so as a result, your eyes start to look dark, like they've got eye makeup on them or something crazy like that. So you really need good lighting. I've got a light over here and a light over here, basically hitting me in the face. I've also got a light from behind that is hitting me in the head. I'm still trying to get the perfect adjustment because I want it to hit me towards the back of the head and in my shoulders to separate me from the background. I'm seeing some in my shoulders, and that's good, but it's still hitting me a little in the forehead, and I'm getting a little shine. So it takes some work to get your lighting right. You're going to need the ability to generate graphics if you're going to do this live to tape. I am a huge fan of ProPresenter. It's even what Willow Creek Community Church uses in lieu of a Chiron or one of those other character generator systems. It just works, and it has the ability to do alpha channels and all other stuff that you may or may not need, but it's just great. It's worth buying it, and it's worth buying a Mac to do it. All you need is a Mac Mini, which is about $500, $600, depending on what you get. So I would strongly recommend that. I'm a big fan of them, but there are other ways of doing it. And if you are, in fact, doing a video podcast, you need a set. Now, if you're doing your church service, that's fine. But you'll notice that behind me, I have a whiteboard that says, trying to do this mirrored, churchtechcast.com on it. That's not by mistake. I did that quite intentionally. You'll also notice that I've got some awards in the bookshelf behind me and some of my books. Huh, it's almost as if I planned that because I planned it. So that's really the bare minimum of what you need to do. And we'll talk about the stages of production in just a second, right after this. Tech Help for Churches is generously provided for by viewers like you. Head on over to patreon.com/Paul Allen Cliff. That's patreon.com/Paul Allen Cliff. And you can support the show for as little as $1 a month. You can make a difference. Thank you for helping make this show and all the shows on the churchtechcast.com network possible. So let's talk about the stages of production, shall we? For every production, there is a set of stages that it goes through. And depending on how well planned out it is, it depends on how long you spend in each stage. So this particular show, I come up with the idea in advance. That's what we call pre-production. Coming up with the idea, making sure the equipment is all lined up, making sure I've got time to do it, making sure that is all taken care of. Pre-production. Production, actually doing it. It's what I'm doing right now. I am in production right now on this particular episode. Post-production, finishing it off and delivering it. That's what I'll be doing in just a few minutes. So those are your 3 stages of production. Let me just use this show as an example, and we'll get going. So I come up with ideas for these shows sometimes weeks or months in advance, sometimes the day before, but I don't come up with the idea of the show while I'm doing the show. That would be a big mistake. That would cause all kinds of problems that I would have to spend much more time in post-production, fixing. So the more time you spend planning and creating what you're going to do, the less time you have to fix the mistakes you made because you didn't plan and create. And I'm an artist. I get it, fellow artists out there. I get that you just want to run by the seat of your pants, let it fly, let it be natural. but at least have an outline. I mean, that's what I have. I have an outline. In this case, the outline was one that I wrote actually a couple of years ago for my book, Podcasting Church, available on Amazon, bit.ly/podcastchurch. All one word, all lowercase. So that is my outline that I follow, at least roughly. Bare minimum pre-production. Having all the equipment in place so that you know that it works and you're ready to go is also part of pre-production. So once that's all set and it's time to go, you can get into production. Now, production can be as short as the duration of the final product, sometimes just a little shorter if you're doing a lot of editing. So you could, let's say you had a half an hour show and you had, it was actually 29 minutes and there was 30 seconds at the beginning and 30 seconds at the end for the intro and outro. So it could be 29 minutes that you actually record, and then you put those two pieces on later, which were pre-recorded. That would be just a little shorter than the final product. But generally it tends to be the same length or longer than the final product. This, even though I'm doing it live to tape, is actually already longer than the final product because I'm going to clip off the beginning where I said, okay, let's make sure this works. Let's check it on the website, and all the things that I do kind of in my pre-flight checkup. So I'm going to clip all that off and start with, on today's Tech Help for Churches. So that's when I will clip it. I'm going to use QuickTime Pro, but we'll talk about that in just a second. So that is production. Whether you're doing live to tape or just recording little segments, you need to have some space for production. And if your talent isn't good enough to do it in one take the first time, or even professionals that do this for years and years sometimes really mess up and they have to do it again and again and again. Watch the outtakes at the end of some movies and you'll see how that happens. If that's the case, then you'll need more time than the real amount of time to do it. So please allow some. If you're planning on a half an hour show, don't allow just a half an hour. Allow at least an hour and a half, I would say, unless you're pretty confident that you can get it taken care of. So I have kind of an open-ended thing happening. Generally speaking, I don't have anything that I need to do immediately after the show. I like to eat lunch, since I record this at 11 a.m. Eastern, which is my time zone, but that's fine. If I had to re-record, I could stop, re-record, and still be only slightly late for lunch. So you need to have plenty of time for your actual live recording or your recorded segments, whatever, and allow some buffer for when people mess up, especially if it's several kind of short chunks. See, some people would have started all over because of my bobble on the word short just there, but I'm not going to. If you've got several short chunks, then you might have to record some of those short chunks over and over again because you think, well, it's just 3 sentences I need to say there. Let me do it again. And so that will take a little bit longer. Post-production. Depending on how you do it, this can be the most time-intensive portion of what you're doing. Editing, for me, is never real time. Never. It always takes a whole lot of time to do. Because, well, when you think about it, this makes perfect sense. If you have a piece that's an hour long, and you're trying to cut that down only by 25%, only to 45 minutes, you've got to watch that hour, then you've got to make decisions, then you've got to cut it, then you've got to rewatch it. you're talking probably bare minimum 2 hours. And that's if the 15-minute chunk is pretty obvious. But if it's not, that could be days of work. So editing can take a lot of time, which is why I'm such a big fan of doing this live to tape. I want a mostly completed project when I'm done. So when I hit stop on the record, I can bring it up in QuickTime. Actually, I'm using QuickTime 7. I can clip off the front, trim it, save it, and be done. Right about now, I'm wishing I had a noise gate because my dog is barking. First day of summer, kids are home. Fun. Anyway, so post-production can be the longest piece, but when you save time, when you spend more time in pre-production and more time in production, it saves you time in post-production. Understand? So you will be saving some time over time. So that is worth doing. So those are the 3 stages of production. Pre-production, production, and post-production. I hope you'll use that and the lesson I talked about earlier on equipment to go out and change eternity. Until next time, I'm Paul Allen Clifford with TrinityDigitalMedia.com.